The lights of the Britain's brightest spotlight studio were blindingly bright and impossibly hot. In the front row, the three judges fanned themselves with their cue cards, already tired from a long day of auditions. To their left, a giant baying audience of 500 people waited, hungry for the next bit of excitement. The host, Declan Shaw, bounced onto the stage with his permanent, brilliant white smile. His suit was expensive and tight. "Welcome back, everyone. Are you having a good time?" The crowd roared on command. He nodded, feeding off the energy. "We've seen some incredible talent today, haven't we? The dancing robots from Bristol, the teenage opera singer with the voice of an angel. What will our next act bring?" He looked down at the card in his hand. His perfectly trimmed eyebrow gave a tiny, almost invisible twitch. He recovered instantly, his smile growing even wider, a sure sign something unusual was coming. "Now, this is interesting. Our next contestant has come all the way from Sheffield. She says she is here to perform a physical art. Please give a very warm spotlight welcome to Edna Forsyth." The applause started, polite and automatic. It was the kind of clapping people did when they weren't really paying attention. All eyes turned to the dark archway at the back of the stage, waiting for a bounding dancer or a muscular acrobat to come sprinting out. Instead, there was a pause. Then, a figure shuffled slowly into the light dot. It was a woman who looked every one of her 78 years. She had soft, silver hair curled neatly around a kind, wrinkled face. She wore a pressed lavender cardigan over a floral blouse, a simple string of pearls, and sensible beige shoes that made a soft, scuffing sound on the polished stage floor. In one hand, she carried a small, well-worn tapestry bag, the kind that might hold knitting or a packed lunch. The polite applause faltered, then died out into a confused, whispering silence. You could hear the hum of the stage lights. Edna seemed entirely unfazed by the quiet. She gave a small, polite wave to the audience, then turned to face the judges. Her movements were careful, considered. She placed her tapestry bag gently on the floor by her feet. At the judge's desk, the mood shifted. Lionel Chase, the music producer famous for his sharp tongue and sharp pursuits, leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. He ran a hand through his gelled hair. "Oh, good Lord," he muttered, just loud enough for his microphone to pick up. "Auntie has taken a wrong turn on her way to the church jumble sale." Next to him, Bex, the pop star with a wardrobe of glitter and attitude, offered a thin, pitying smile. She leaned into her mic, her voice sugary. "Hello, love. You found the stage? Well done. Are you all right over there?" The third judge, Vikram, the comedian, saw an easy joke. He was always looking for one. "Did you lose your shopping trolley, darling?" He called out, grinning. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." "A lost and found?" "Because I think the post office is down the street." A ripple of nervous laughter came from the audience. They weren't sure if they were allowed to laugh, but the judges were. Edna just stood there, her hands folded in front of her. She waited for the gentle mockery to settle. Her eyes, a clear, watery blue, were calm. Declan, the host, glided over to her, his expression one of professional concern. "Edna, welcome. A physical art, you say? Now you have to help us out here. What exactly are you going to do for us today?" Edna's voice, when she spoke, was soft but clear. It had the gentle, rolling accent of the North. "Well, I'm going to perform a routine to music. A sort of dance." Lionel couldn't help himself. He leaned forward, peering over his glasses. "A dance? My dear, is it a seated dance? We have to think about health and safety, you understand. We don't want any hips going out on national television." More laughter, louder this time. The audience was relaxing into the joke. This was the comic relief act. A sweet old dear who thought line dancing was cutting edge. Edna gave a small, patient smile, as if she'd heard it all 1,000 times before. I'll be quite all right, thank you. I have my own music, if that's permissible. Of course, Declan said, signaling to the sound booth. The stage is yours, Edna, whenever you're ready. Edna gave a little nod. She didn't do any stretches. She didn't shake out her limbs or take deep, dramatic breaths like the other acts. She simply bent down, with a slight stiffness that made everyone hold theirs, and opened her tapestry bag. She pulled out a small, old-fashioned digital music player. She walked over to the stage manager, a young man in a headset who looked bewildered, and handed it to him. She pointed to the headphone jack and gave quiet instructions. Then she walked back to the center of the stage. She stood perfectly still, her arms at her sides. The spotlight made her lavender cardigan seem to glow. The sequins on the judge's clothes glittered. The contrast was huge. Lionel exchanged a look with Vikram. It was a look that said, asterisk, this is going to be a disaster. Let's get it over with. Asterisk, his finger hovered playfully over the large red buzzer on his desk. One press would sound a loud, rude horn and stop the act dead. He was ready to use it. The audience could feel it. They leaned forward, some hoping he wouldn't, some morbidly curious to see how long she'd last. The first sounds came from the speakers. It was a slow, stately, old-fashioned waltz. The kind of music you might hear at a tea dance in a village hall in 1953. It was exactly what everyone expected. Edna closed her eyes. She seemed to be listening, gathering herself. Nothing happened for 5 seconds. Then 10. Bex bit her lip. Oh no, she whispered. She's frozen. Stage fright. Poor thing. Vikram chuckled. She's trying to remember where she left her glasses. Give her a minute. The waltz continued its plodding, predictable loop. Edna remained a statue. Lionel's smile was now a smirk of pure impatience. This was wasting everyone's time. He looked at the host, Declan, as if to say, asterisk, do something. Asterisk Declan took a step forward, about to kindly intervene. That's when it happened. The gentle waltz melted away, replaced by a single deep, resonant cello note that hung in the air. Then another. And then, with a sudden, breathtaking surge, the familiar, beautiful, and powerfully emotional chords of Pachelbel's Canon in D exploded into the studio. But this wasn't the sleepy version you hear at weddings. It was a modern, remixed version, underpinned by a deep, rhythmic, electronic pulse that vibrated through the floor. And Edna moved. It wasn't a shuffle. It wasn't a careful step. In one fluid, shockingly graceful motion, her hands went to the buttons of her lavender cardigan. She shrugged it off her shoulders and let it fall to the stage floor in a heap of soft wool. Underneath, she wore not a floral blouse, but a sleek, black, sleeveless leotard, studded with thousands of tiny, dark sequins that caught the light like a night sky. But no one had time to process the costume change, because in the same second, she stepped towards the old-fashioned, wrought-iron lamppost that was part of the stage's street scene backdrop. Everyone had assumed it was just a decoration. Edna's hand closed around the iron post. With a strength that seemed to come from nowhere, she lifted her feet off the ground. The audience gasped as one single, shocked creature. Lionel's fingers slipped off the buzzer. His jaw went slack. Edna Forsyth, a 78-year-old grandma from Sheffield, was now spinning around the lamppost, her body a line of pure, controlled power, her face a picture of serene, focused strength. The lamppost wasn't a prop. It was her pole. The gasp from the audience hung in the air, a thick cloud of shock. For a second, the only sound was the driving, beautiful pulse of the music and the soft, slick whisper of skin on metal. Edna's body, now a stark silhouette against the bright lights, was not the frail shape they had all seen just moments before. The careful stiffness was gone. Every line of her was extended, purposeful. She held herself horizontal to the stage floor, one leg pointing forward, the other bent gracefully back, her arms supporting her weight on the pole with an ease that seemed impossible. It was a pose of pure strength, held with the calm of someone resting in an armchair at the judge's table. All three were frozen. Lionel had jerked his hand back from the buzzer as if it had burned him. He was leaning so far forward, his chair was in danger of tipping over. His mouth was slightly open, but no clever words came out. The smirk was wiped clean off his face, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending astonishment. Bex, the pop star, had both hands clamped over her mouth. Her eyes, usually full of cool judgment, were wide as saucers. She wasn't seeing an old woman anymore. She was seeing an athlete, an artist. She slowly lowered her hands, shaking her head in a tiny, disbelieving motion. Vikram, the comedian, had lost all interest in jokes. He was just staring, his head tilted, trying to process the information his eyes were sending him. The easy laughter lines around his eyes were now tight with concentration. Edna moved. She didn't jump or thrash. She flowed. She let go with one hand, arching her back into a deep curve, her free arms sweeping through the air like a ballet dancer's. Then, using a momentum that seemed to come from her core, she spun around the pole, her body a blur of sequins and controlled motion. She stopped suddenly, perfectly, wrapping herself around the metal in a complex hold. One arm and one leg hooked, the other limbs extending out in a beautiful diagonal line. A young man in the third row, who had been texting his friend about the sad grandma act, dropped his phone into his lap. He didn't notice. The music swelled, the electronic beat merging perfectly with the classic strings. Edna transitioned into another move. She inverted herself, pushing her hips up until she was completely upside down, her legs scissoring wide in a perfect split high above the stage. The silver hair, now freed from its careful curls, cascaded toward the floor. She held the inverted split, not trembling, not straining, just holding it as the audience roared. This wasn't polite applause anymore. It was a wave of sound shouts, cheers, screams of "Go on." And yes, people were on their feet, not because it was expected, but because they couldn't stay seated. Backstage, it was chaos. The young contestants, the dancing robots, and the teenage opera singer were all crammed into the wings, peeking through the curtains. Their faces were mirrors of the audience's shock. "No way," breathed one of the robot dancers, his metallic costume suddenly feeling silly. The stage manager who had taken Edna's music player was staring, his headset forgotten, a slow grin spreading across his face. On stage, Edna's expression never changed to one of strain. There was a faint, focused smile on her lips, the look of someone immersed deeply in something they love. She came out of the inversion smoothly, spinning down the pole in a slow, controlled descent before pushing off again into another series of spins. Her body coiling and uncoiling like a ribbon. Lionel finally found his voice. It wasn't the loud, sarcastic boom from before. It was quieter, filled with awe. He spoke into his microphone, but it was more to himself than to the cameras. "Will you look at that? Will you just look at that?" Bex was nodding, her eyes glistening. She saw the artistry now, the years of discipline hidden beneath the cardigan. She saw the story in every controlled movement. This wasn't a party trick. This was a lifetime. Edna moved into her finale. The music began to build to its peak. She climbed the pole using just the strength of her arms and a grip of her legs, not scrambling, but ascending with a powerful, rhythmic grace. Near the top, she let go with her legs entirely, holding her body out from the pole, with just her hands in a move that made the muscles in her arms and back stand out in sharp relief. For a terrifying, wonderful second, she was just hanging there, parallel to the floor, defying gravity and every expectation in the room. Then, in a sweeping motion, she swung her body around, hooking the inside of her knee and spinning down, around and around, a glittering constellation against the dark backdrop, faster and faster as the music reached its crescendo. And as the final triumphant note sounded, she landed on her feet, one knee bent, one arm extended towards the judges, her head bowed, her chest rising and falling steadily with her breath. Silence. For one heartbeat, two. The huge studio was utterly still. Then the dam broke. The sound that erupted was deafening. It was a physical force. Every single person was standing, stamping their feet, screaming, whistling. The applause was a thunderous, continuous roar that showed no sign of stopping. Confetti from a previous act, caught in the stage lights, swirled around Edna like a celebration. Edna straightened up. She was breathing deeply, but she wasn't panting. She brushed a strand of silver hair from her forehead and gave a small, humble bow. Then she walked over, picked up her discarded lavender cardigan from the floor, and slipped it back on over her sequined leotard. The gesture was so ordinary, so her, that it made the whole incredible performance seem even more miraculous. Declan, the host, ran onto the stage. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck of wonder. He tried to speak into his microphone, but his words were swallowed by the ongoing cheers. He finally just put an arm around Edna's shoulders gently, reverently, and let the applause wash over them. He looked at the judges, who were also on their feet, clapping. Lionel was clapping slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on Edna. Bex was wiping tears from her cheeks. Vikram was whistling loudly through his fingers. It took a full minute for the noise to die down enough for Declan to speak. His voice was choked with emotion. Edna Forsyth, I don't even know what to say, judges. I think you might have some thoughts. He guided Edna to the center of the stage, facing the desk. The three judges slowly sat back down, but their postures were completely different. They weren't lounging or judging. They were perched on the edges of their seats, students waiting for a master to speak. Lionel was the first to reach for his microphone. He cleared his throat. The cynical, slick-talking music mogul was gone. In his place was a man who had just had his world tilted. Edna, he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I owe you an apology. We all do. He glanced at his fellow judges, who nodded solemnly. What we just witnessed, that wasn't just talent. That was a revolution. The roar of the crowd finally began to soften, settling into a background hum of excited chatter and the occasional whoop. The bright stage lights felt different now. They weren't exposing a frail old woman. They were illuminating something extraordinary. Edna stood there, her lavender cardigan buttoned neatly over the dark sequins. She looked calm, her hands folded again, but now there was a quiet confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. Declan, the host, was still trying to find his professional footing. He kept looking from Edna to the judges to the audience, his face a picture of delighted shock. I mean, wow, just wow. Edna, I think you broke the internet, and we're not even live yet. The audience laughed, a warm, supportive sound now. He turned to the judges. Bex, you were the first one on your feet. What was going through your mind? Bex reached for a tissue from under the desk, dabbing carefully at her smudged eyeliner. Her voice, when she spoke into the microphone, was thick with emotion. Oh, don't get me started. I'm a mess. She gave a watery laugh. Edna, love, what you just did, that was the most beautiful, powerful thing I have ever seen on this stage. Ever. She shook her head, struggling for the right words. It wasn't just the moves, which were insane, by the way. It was the story. I saw a story in your face. You weren't just performing. You were remembering. You were somewhere else. And you took all of us with you. She took a breath. When you came out, I thought, oh, this sweet lady. And then you took off your cardigan, and it was like a superhero taking off their normal clothes. You changed the air in this room. You have no idea. That was art. That was pure, raw art. Thank you. Bex put her hand over her heart and gave a little nod, as if saying a silent thank you herself. The audience applauded her words. Edna gave a slight, gracious bow of her head towards Bex. Thank you, my dear. That's very kind. Kind? It's the truth, Bex said, fanning her face with her hand. Declan turned next to Vikram, the comedian. Vikram, not a word from you. That's a first. What's the verdict? Vikram had been uncharacteristically quiet, just watching Edna with a soft, thoughtful look. He picked up his mic. You know, I make a living out of talking. Finding the joke. The quick line. He paused, his usual cheeky grin absent. And I started that way today. I made a cheap joke about your shopping trolley, Edna. And for that, I am truly, genuinely sorry. He didn't sound like he was doing it for the cameras. He sounded ashamed. The thing is, he continued, you didn't just show us a talent. You taught us a lesson. You taught me a lesson. You taught us all about judging a book by its cover. You walked out here, and we all wrote a story for you. Sweet old lady, probably knits, maybe sings a hymn. We put you in a box. And you didn't just step out of that box. You blew it to smithereens with the most jaw-dropping thing I've ever seen. He leaned forward. You're my hero. Seriously. My kids are going to hear about you tonight. That was incredible. A massive, massive yes from me. The crowd cheered for Vikram's humility. Edna smiled, a real warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. No harm done, young man. We all have our off days. Finally, all eyes turned to Lionel, the head judge, the critic everyone feared. He had been sitting very still, his chin resting on his steepled fingers, just watching Edna. The silence stretched for a moment, heavy with expectation. What would the sharpest tongue in the business say? Lionel slowly picked up his microphone. He didn't look at the audience or the cameras. He looked only at Edna. Edna Forsythe, he said, his voice low and clear, without a trace of its usual sarcastic edge. In my 20 years of doing this job, I have heard thousands of people talk about their dream. I've heard them say they'll die if they don't get a yes. I've watched them do backflips and hit high notes and perform magic tricks. He paused, choosing his words with great care. But I have never, in all that time, seen someone redefine the very concept of a talent show on this stage. Until today. He let that sink in. The studio was pin-drop quiet. You didn't just perform routine, he went on. You performed a revolution in 90 seconds. You challenged every single lazy assumption in this building. Mine most of all. He gestured to the pole, the now sacred lamppost. What you do. That requires the strength of an athlete, the grace of a dancer, and the heart of an artist. To see those three things combined in someone with your life experience. He shook his head, almost in disbelief. It is nothing short of breathtaking. He put the microphone down for a second, as if his words weren't enough. Then he picked it up again. You asked us for permission to perform a physical art. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. We thought it was a joke. But you were the only one in on it. And the joke, Mrs. Forsythe, was very firmly on us. That was not a yes. That was an honor to witness. A privilege. Lionel, The man who never gave compliments lightly had just given a speech. He sat back. His piece said the audience was moved. You could feel it. It wasn't just excitement anymore. It was respect, deep and solid. Declan let the moment hang in the air before turning back to Edna. Edna, the judges are clearly blown away. But we have to ask, how? Why? Where on earth did this come from? Edna adjusted the cuff of her cardigan. Her voice was still that soft northern lilt, but it carried perfectly in the hushed studio. Well, it's a long story, Declan. But I suppose the short version is, it's something I've loved since I was a girl. Before it was called pole art, of course. Back then, it was just the circus. A fresh wave of murmurs went through the crowd. Asterisk the circus? Asterisk, that's right, she continued, a distant, fond look in her eyes. I ran away with a traveling circus when I was 17. Not to feed the lions, mind you. I was an aerialist. Silk ropes, trapeze, that sort of thing. The pole was always my favorite. It felt like flying. She smiled at the memory. I did that for nearly 15 years. Saw the world. Met my husband. He was a carpenter with the show. Then we settled down. Had a family. Life gets busy, doesn't it? The costumes went into a trunk. The calluses on my hands softened. She looked down at her hands, then held one up briefly. The camera zoomed in. There, on her palms and fingers, were the faint, pale shadows of old calluses, overlaid with newer, pinker ones. The proof was right there. When my husband passed, and the arthritis started whispering in my knees, I got a bit low, she said, matter-of-factly. My daughter, she's a practical one, she said. Mum, you need to move, or you'll seize up altogether. She found a class at the local community center. Pole fitness for over 55s. I thought she was mad. Edna chuckled, a lovely, gentle sound. I went along just to humor her. And the moment I touched the pole again, oh, it was like coming home. It was like shaking hands with an old friend. She looked at the judges, her gaze clear and direct. It's not about being the best, or the strongest, or the youngest. It's about feeling alive. It's my medicine. For the joints and for the soul. I go 3 times a week. We have a lovely little group. We call ourselves the Steel Magnolias. We gossip, we have a cup of tea, and we hoist each other up on the poles. It's our time. Bex was crying again, openly now. Vikram was nodding, his eyes bright. Lionel just listened, his expression one of profound respect. So you came here today? Declan prompted gently. I came here today, Edna said, because my granddaughter said I should. She said, Nana, you're amazing. The world should see. And I thought, well, maybe she's right. Maybe it's time to stop hiding my light under a bushel, as they say, or under a cardigan. She gave a little shrug. And maybe, just maybe, if another woman my age is sitting at home feeling like her best days are behind her, she see this and think, well, if that old bird can do it, maybe I can try something new too. That did it. The audience erupted once more, not just in cheers, but in vocal agreement. Shouts of yes. And you show them. Echoed around. Declan put a hand on her shoulder. Edna Forsyth, you have not only shown us something unforgettable, you have given us all a lesson we desperately needed. Judges, it's time to vote. Lionel, let's start with you. Is Edna going through to the next round of Britain's Brightest Spotlight? Lionel didn't even pretend to think. He reached over and slammed his hand on the large, green yes button on his desk. A triumphant golden light lit up his panel. Without a shadow of a doubt, he said, his voice firm. Bex? Bex was already hitting her button. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Vikram? Vikram hit his button so hard he winced. The biggest YES of my life. 4 golden YES lights glowed on the judge's desk. A clean sweep. The confetti cannons, reserved for the very best auditions, fired with a great whoosh, filling the air with shimmering gold. The music swelled. Edna looked around, a little startled by the explosion, then laughed, a sound of pure surprised joy. As the golden paper settled around her shoulders like a glittering shawl. She looked, for the first time, like what she truly was, a champion, not just of a talent show, but of a different, braver way of living. She waved at the screaming crowd, then bent down with that same careful stiffness, picked up her tapestry bag, and gave one last, gracious nod. The walk back through the archway was the same slow, measured walk. But this time, no one saw an old woman shuffling off. They saw a legend leaving the stage, her secret now a gift for the whole world. The golden confetti was still drifting in the air like lazy snowflakes as the stage manager gently guided Edna through the heavy curtains and into the backstage area. The roar of the audience was muffled now, a distant, happy thunder. The bright, hot world of the stage was replaced by the cool, shadowy chaos of behind the dash scenes. It was like stepping into another universe. The quiet, focused space she'd left was gone. Now it was a packed corridor of buzzing energy. Young contestants in glitter and lycra, stagehands with headsets, camera operators, and runners all seemed to freeze for a split second as she appeared. Then they moved. It started with a single pair of hands clapping. One of the stagehands, a burly man with a beard who had seen 1,000 acts come and go, put down his clipboard and began to applaud. Then another joined, and another. Soon, the entire backstage corridor was filled with the sound of applause, more intimate than the audience's roar, but somehow more powerful. These were the people who saw the sweat and the nerves. They knew what real talent looked like, and they were giving her a standing ovation of their own. Edna seemed a bit overwhelmed. She offered small, polite smiles and nods, clutching her tapestry bag a little tighter. Thank you kindly," she murmured. Before she could take more than a few steps, she was surrounded. The young dancing robots, still in their metallic suits, were first. Their earlier cockiness was gone. One of them, the leader, blurted out, "Miss, that was next level. The control on that inversion. How do you not get dizzy?" The teenage opera singer, still in her elegant gown, touched Edna's arm lightly, her eyes wide. "You made me cry," she said simply. "That was so beautiful." A young man with a guitar slung over his back just shook his head and said, "Respect. Total respect." Edna handled it all with a grandmother's calm. "Oh, you get used to the spinning, dear. It's like being on a merry-go-round as a child." To the opera singer, she said, "And your voice earlier was like an angel's. Don't you ever stop singing." A production assistant with a headset fought her way through the small crowd. Edna, we need you in the interview room for your post-audition chat. And then the producers would like a quick word, if that's all right." "Of course, dear," Edna said. "Lead the way." The interview room was a small, quiet space with a sofa and a camera on a tripod. A friendly young woman with a microphone introduced herself. "We just have a few questions about how you're feeling, Edna. Is that okay?" Edna settled onto the sofa, smoothing her cardigan. "Perfectly okay. So, 4 yeses. Golden confetti. How does that feel?" Edna thought for a moment. "It feels rather surprising, to be honest," she said with a small laugh. "I came here to show my little piece of the world. I didn't expect all this fuss, but it's very lovely. The judges were very kind." "Kind?" The interviewer smiled. "Lionel Chase called it an honor. He's not known for that." "Well," Edna said, her eyes twinkling. Even sharp stones get smoothed by the sea eventually, don't they? Back in the main corridor, the head producer, a woman in smart glasses who had been watching everything from the control booth, found Edna as she came out of the interview. Edna, a magnificent performance. Truly, we'd love to have you back for the next round. There will be some paperwork, and we'll need to schedule some rehearsals. Is that something you'd be interested in? Edna nodded. I said I'd see it through, and I will. But I'll need to check with my daughter about the dates. She manages my diary, you see, and I have my regular classes. The producer looked almost amused. This woman had just delivered the most viral moment in the show's history, and she was worried about her pole class schedule. Of course. We'll make it work around you. As Edna was finally led towards the exit, a change had come over the backstage area. The other contestants weren't just looking at her with awe. They were looking at themselves differently. The girl who was worried her pop song was too old-fashioned stood a little taller. The magician who had fumbled a trick earlier stopped berating himself. If a 78-year-old woman could walk out there and own the stage like that, what was their excuse? The journey home was a quiet contrast. Instead of a show car, Edna had insisted on taking the train. I've a senior's rail card, she'd said. No point wasting the money. Sitting by the window as the city lights gave way to darker countryside, she finally had a moment to herself. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, warm tiredness. She opened her tapestry bag and took out a small Tupperware box with 2 digestive biscuits. She ate them slowly, watching her reflection in the black glass. Her phone, an old but reliable model, buzzed in her bag. It was her daughter. She answered, "Mom?" "Oh my goodness, we saw it online." A clip from the studio audience. You were spectacular. The girls are going mad." Edna could hear her grandchildren shrieking with excitement in the background. A slow smile spread across her face. "Was it all right? I didn't embarrass you?" "Embarrass us? Mom, we're so proud we could burst." "When are you home?" "We've made a cake." "I'm on the 8:15, love. I'll be there by 10:30. We'll be waiting. Love you too, dear." She hung up. The smile remained. That was the real prize, she thought. Not the golden confetti, but the sound of her family's pride. The next morning, in her small, tidy house on the outskirts of Sheffield, the world came knocking. Edna was in her garden, hanging out washing, when her daughter's car screeched to a halt outside. "Mom, have you seen the news?" "What news, dear?" "I'm just doing the sheets." Her daughter, breathless, held up her phone. There, on the screen of a major news website, was a picture of Edna in her sequined leotard mid-spin. The headline read, "Grandma Smashes Stereotypes on National TV." Below it, another, the 78-year-old pole artist who stole the nation's heart. "Good heavens," Edna said, peering at the screen. "They used my good side." By lunchtime, her quiet street had a few unfamiliar cars parked on it. A local news crew from Sheffield had arrived, asking for an interview. Then a national newspaper called. Then a famous morning talk show. Edna, with her daughter's help, agreed to a few polite conversations on her doorstep. She said the same things she'd said to the judges. It was about joy, not age. It was about movement, not spectacle. She talked about the steel magnolias, her class at the community center. That evening, something remarkable happened. The phone at the Sheffield Community Center started ringing. And it didn't stop. The coordinator, a lovely woman named Fiona, who ran the over 55s classes, called Edna, her voice giddy with excitement. "Edna, what have you done?" "I've had 30 calls today. Women and a few men. All asking about the pole class. They all say they saw you. We're going to have to start a waiting list." Edna felt a surge of happiness stronger than any applause. This was it. This was the why. A few days later, she returned to her class. It was held in a bright, airy hall with high ceilings. Poles were securely bolted to the floor and ceiling. When she walked in, her group of friendswomen in their 60s, 70s, and one sprightly 81-year-old erupted into cheers and laughter. They surrounded her, hugging her, demanding every detail. "You showed them, Edna. Our celebrity. Did you see that judge's face? Priceless." They got to work. The warm-up was gentle, to music they all liked. There was a lot of chatting and laughter. Then they moved to the poles. Some worked on simple spins, building strength. Others, like Edna, tried more complex moves, spotting each other, offering pillows for support, shouting encouragement. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying. It was about the shared effort, the collective joy of bodies that were supposed to be slowing down, deciding to speed up just a little bit more. As Edna helped her friend, a woman who'd had a hip replacement, to hold a simple pose, she looked around the room. She saw concentration. She saw determination. She saw the flush of achievement on a face that had just managed a full spin for the first time. This was a real stage, not the one with the bright lights and the screaming crowds. This room, with the smell of cleaning fluid and the sound of comfortable laughter. This was where the quiet revolution was happening. One gentle, strong grip at a time. She knew the TV show would have more rounds. There would be more rehearsals, more pressure. But as she leaned against the pole, catching her breath and sharing a joke about stiff knees, she knew none of that was the important part. The important art was already done. The message was sent. The world was watching, and finally it was seeing. The weeks that followed Edna's audition were a gentle whirlwind. Life had changed, but in her sensible way, she made sure it didn't change too much. She still did her shopping on Tuesday mornings. She still tended to her small garden, where the roses were just beginning to bud. The biggest difference was the post. Her daughter had to buy a large wicker basket to hold all the letters that arrived, spilling over with handwritten notes from people all over the country. They weren't fan letters, not really. They were stories. A woman in Cornwall, aged 72, wrote to say she'd signed up for a Tai Chi class after watching her. A man from Scotland, recovering from a heart operation, said Edna's calm strength had given him the courage to start his walks again. Dozens of letters came from younger people, apologizing for how they'd underestimated their own grandparents. Teachers wrote to say they'd shown the video in class to talk about prejudice and potential. Each envelope contained a little piece of someone's life, handed to her for safekeeping. It was humbling. The show, Britain's brightest spotlight, moved into its live semi-finals. The atmosphere was electric and tense. The acts were bigger, the staging more elaborate, the judges' critiques more serious. Edna's rehearsals were fitted in around her life. The show's young, energetic choreographer would demonstrate a complex, flashy routine full of leaps and drops. Edna would watch politely, then say, "That's very nice, dear. But at my pace, if I did that jump, my knees would be calling for a revolt. How about we try something like this instead?" And she would show a sequence that was just as beautiful, but built on control and grace rather than wild acrobatics. The choreographer, initially unsure, soon became a convert. He started calling her the master. The night of the semi-final arrived. This time, Edna didn't walk out alone to a quiet stage. She was introduced as the sensation of the season. The audience roared her name before she even appeared. When she did, she wore a suit of deep midnight blue, tailored trousers, and a sleeveless top covered in subtle sequins that shone like stars. There was no cardigan to remove. She was already herself. Her performance was different. The music was a haunting, beautiful mix of a classical piano piece and soft, modern drums. Her routine told a story. It was a story of memory. You could see it in her movements, the joyful, free spins of youth, a slower, more careful section that spoke of love and family, and then a powerful, soaring finale that was all about rediscovery. It wasn't about shocking people this time. It was about moving them. And it worked. The standing ovation was longer, if that was possible. The judges praised her artistry, her narrative. She sailed through to the final. But something interesting was happening backstage. The other finalists, the brilliant young opera singer, the dizzyingly fast dance crew, looked to Edna not as competition, but as a sort of team captain. In the tense waiting room, she would be the one passing around a bag of lemon drops, asking the breakdancers if they'd remembered to stretch properly, reminding the nervous singer to breathe from her diaphragm. She had become the heart of the competition. The grand final was a huge television event. Millions were watching. The pressure was immense. For her final performance, Edna chose something simple and powerful. She performed to a song about time and resilience. Her pole was not a lamppost this time, but a simple chrome column. She didn't do her most complex tricks. Instead, she performed a routine of such pure, clean lines and held poses that it took your breath away. It was a statement. It said, "This is strength. This is grace. This is what a lifetime looks like." When she finished, the host, Declan, asked her what she would do if she won. The winner would receive a large cash prize and a starring role in a West End show. Edna looked out at the sea of expectant faces. She smiled into the camera. "Well, I think the West End might need a little more sleep than I can give it," she said, to warm laughter. "But if I were lucky enough to win, I'd use the prize to do two things. First, I'd buy some new poles for our community center. Ours are getting a bit wobbly, and we can't have the steel magnolias falling apart, can we?" The audience cheered. "And second," she continued, her voice softening, "I'd like to help start more classes like ours in other towns. Places where people my age, or any age really, can go to find a bit of joy and a bit of strength they didn't know they had left." In the end, she didn't win first place. The trophy went to the incredible teenage opera singer, whose voice that night could have cracked the sky open. It was the right choice, and Edna was the first to wrap the cheerful girl in a warm, genuine hug. "You were magnificent, darling. Absolutely magnificent," she whispered. But as the confetti fell for the winner, something else happened. Lionel, the head judge, asked for the microphone. "Before we close," he said, his voice serious, "there is one more award to give. It's not an official trophy, but it is the highest honor this panel can bestow. The Spirit of the Spotlight Award, for the contestant who truly embodies what this show is supposed to be about, discovering not just talent, but inspiration." He didn't even say her name. He just turned and looked at Edna, standing to the side, clapping for the winner. The audience knew. They began to chant it. "Edna, Edna, Edna." They brought out a simple, beautiful glass sculpture, shaped like a rising spiral. As they handed it to her, Lionel said, "You, Edna Forsyth, didn't just enter a competition. You changed the conversation. And for that, we thank you." That moment, many said later, felt more important than the winner's announcement. Life after the show returned to a new kind of normal. The reporters eventually stopped camping on her doorstep. The phone calls slowed, but the letters kept coming, and Edna kept reading every single one. The real victory was visible every Tuesday and Thursday at the Sheffield Community Center. The Steel Magnolias class was now 3 classes, running back to back with a waiting list. The room was a symphony of laughter, groans, and encouragement. There were women there who had never exercised in their lives. There were men shy at first, now proudly showing off their improved grip strength. Edna wasn't always the teacher, but she was always there, a gentle presence, offering a steadying hand or a word of advice. One afternoon, a documentary film crew came to visit. They were making a short film about her. They filmed the class, the laughter, the quiet moments of struggle and triumph. They interviewed Fiona, the coordinator, who said, "Before Edna went on TV, we were just a little class. A secret. Now we're a movement. People don't feel silly coming here anymore. They feel proud." They asked Edna what she thought her legacy would be. She was sitting on a bench in her garden, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She thought for a long moment. "Legacy is a big word," she said finally. "I don't think about that. I think about Zhang in our class, who couldn't lift her arms above her head when she started. Now she can. I think about my granddaughter, who looks at me not just as her nana who makes soup, but as someone who can do something she thinks is cool." She smiled, sipping her tea. "If people look at me and think, well, if she can try something new at 78, maybe I can try something today, then that's plenty. That's more than enough." The documentary ended with a shot of the community center hall. The camera panned across the faces, young and old, each focused on their own goal, their own personal challenge. The music was soft, and there was Edna, not in the center, but at the side, helping a new member find her footing. She wasn't a distant star on a screen anymore. She was right there, in the middle of the quiet, joyful revolution she had started, one gentle, strong grip at a time, teaching the world that the most extraordinary things often have the most ordinary beginnings, and that it is never, ever too late to surprise yourself.